Preservation Virginia was founded by a group of dedicated women in 1889 that saw the places important to them were fading into the landscape. They organized and advocated for those places. Over 131 years, that advocacy effort has been involved with more than 500 historic places across the Commonwealth.
Preservation Virginia is the oldest statewide preservation organization in the country and was actually a sponsor of the National Trust when the National Trust was created in 1949. It has developed the tools to really address issues that are critical to our understanding of where America is as a society.
The work we've done with Preservation Virginia specifically really centers around the 10 most endangered historic sites to really promote why these sites are important to the Virginia landscape.
The places that Preservation Virginia or APVA was saving were the big houses, the important people, and that's important to the story. But there's so much more dynamic history in Virginia.
I'm specifically interested in projects where organizations are really interested in grappling with the most difficult topics and bringing that to the public in a constructive way where people can engage with it and have a healthy conversation about it.
Preservation Virginia also has really focused on telling the full American story, the stories of all Americans.
My grandparents were just out of slavery. It was as if my ancestors were speaking to me about how privileged I am, a granddaughter of persons who paid the price for education.
Really now, I think we're enlisting people that are involved in social justice and environmental justice, people that care about the communities. They're all part of the preservation movement today.
And I think the great thing that Preservation Virginia does is it helps to bring those historic sites into context, into a narrative about the state's history. We all have a history. We all have a sense of why our own histories are important. And I think there's, even within that connection, some commonality, some denominator of understanding with one another.
The impact it has on the community members and the descendants of that community who now have their histories being valued by a major institution, it's a really important thing. It's a really big deal.
Preservation Virginia has been a wonderful partner because they're not afraid to take action. They're not afraid to be advocates, strong advocates, and we're working with them not only in the courts but also in government, in the legislature in Richmond, to try to bring attention to this issue. So they have connections, they have resources, they have energy. It's just the type of preservation organization that we value as a critical partner in the work that we do at the national level.
The reality is Preservation Virginia is a small organization. We have huge ambitions, and the way we accomplish that is we bring more people in to work together with us. Today, historic preservation is not about saying no. It never has been. It's about managing change. How can you keep the historic fabric and adapt it for the uses for people today and in the future? Well, good evening again to all of our friends that are here with us at Patrick Henry Scotchtown, and welcome to those that are joining us remotely. This evening has been 3 years in the making. Like so many events, we have had to pivot and adjust, and finally, we've been able to come together to celebrate these achievements in preservation. As I mentioned earlier to you all under the tent, but for those that are joining remotely, I'm Elizabeth Kostelny, and I am the CEO of Preservation Virginia, and it is a real honor to be in this position. We are grateful and that David Rubinstein is joining us, and he will address us a little later in the program. I also want to acknowledge Steve Trivett, Mayor of Ashland. Julie Langen, Director of the Department of Historic Resources. and our award recipients for the years 2020 and 2022. We're so glad to be here with you. Thanks goes, Thanks goes to our Ionic level sponsors, Rick Barker Properties, Davenport and Company, Giles Jet Investment Group, Daniel and Company, PMA Architecture, and our Doric and patron level sponsors that are listed on the back of your program. Our appreciation goes to Mr. Rubinstein, who has his gift to you tonight are the books that are your place settings. So we very much appreciate that as well. And a special thanks goes to Patty Lockridge. This was her idea in 2019. It just took us a little while to pull it all together. Preservation Virginia is guided by a distinguished board of trustees and an amazingly talented staff. So I want to take a moment and recognize our trustees. If you can hold up your hands. Okay, I know you're here. They're all on this side. And our really dedicated staff. We have an all-star team who have optimized every opportunity, undertaking strategic planning in the midst of 2020, finding ways to engage in the evolving issues that face historic places, all the while not missing a beat and exceeding the goals of our comprehensive campaign. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so you'll have to wait to hear the news on that. Our effectiveness as an organization is born out of our deeply held belief that historic places matter. They are dynamic forums for dialogues about the people and events and the past and how the legacies of those moments continue to shape our present and our future. By acknowledging different perspectives, learning, stories overlooked and ignored, and opening ourselves to a fuller understanding of the collective history of these places, we become more informed participants in our communities, Commonwealth, and nation. For 133 years, Preservation Virginia has focused on preserving and adapting places of the past to ensure their relevance and vitality for the future. In the last 3 decades, beginning with the launch of the Jamestown Rediscovery Archaeological project, this organization has undergone transformational change to ensure that our programs and advocacy efforts reflect the diverse nature of the Commonwealth's historic places and to address the opportunities and challenges they face. Our public policy efforts, our most endangered sites program, local community capacity building, and the programs at our 6 interpreted sites support building a collaborative network of allies, partners, supporters, and advocates. In 2016, we launched our very first comprehensive campaign to support our programs, restoration projects, and to strengthen our educational, interpretive, and community engagement programs. We set a goal of $12 million, and that seemed a lot to us at the time. Well, tonight, you are among the first to learn that we have exceeded that goal. To date, we've raised $15.8 million. Yeah. Those funds are invested in restoration projects at our 6 historic sites, including the roof that you see behind me at Scotchtown, a dune and a stone restoration projects at Cape Henry Lighthouse, and much more at the John Marshall House, Bacon's Castle, Smith's Fort, and historic Jamestown. The campaign supported a statewide survey of more than 380 Rosenwald schools built in Virginia, a consultation process with Virginia's tribal nations, economic impact studies, Shockoe Bottom, historic tax credit programs, and other preservation tools, creation of an African American Fellows Program intended to be a pipeline to diversify the field, as well as exhibits, educational programs, and so much more. Through the exemplary efforts of our development team, and that is our board and our staff, we increased support to our annual fund, and incredibly, we secured $7 million to invest in our long-term cash reserves. We are grateful to the committee chairs who launched and managed this campaign since 2016, and they include Ann Cross, Helen Reevely, and Patty Lockridge. And we are indebted to Will Glasgow, who's hiding out there outside the tent, our Director of Development. We have a great deal to celebrate tonight. And to set the stage, it's my distinct honor to introduce Genevieve P. Keller, Preservation Virginia's Board Chair. Jenny's leadership in championing historic places and cultural landscapes is well known. Her engagement with our organization can be traced to her role as one of the founders of Preservation Alliance of Virginia in the 1980s, and as part of the team that united the Alliance mission and programs with that of Preservation Virginia in 2004. She has served in various capacities on Preservation Virginia's board, culminating in becoming the board chair in 2020. She couldn't have known what she was getting into, and it's been her steady hand and confidence in our mission that has guided this organization through the uncertainties of the past several years and made us a more resilient and responsive organization. Jenny?
Thank you, Elizabeth. It has been my privilege to work with you over these years, but especially these last almost 3 years, to support the amazing work, people, and organizations that we honor here tonight. It is wonderful to be together at Scotchtown to celebrate the success of our fundraising campaign that sustains our programs and historic sites, such as this one, that are under our Preservation Virginia stewardship. And I join Elizabeth in offering many thanks and congratulations to all who led and supported these efforts. Will, Patty, Ann, and Helen, and all of you here tonight and in our home audiences as well. One more round of applause. The places and projects we amplify tonight illuminate not only the breadth and width of preservation in Virginia, but also the people who power preservation all over our Commonwealth. We come together tonight to celebrate people and place. I'm sure you've all heard about NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And maybe as a preservationist, you might have been called that. And maybe your response has been to be a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. But regardless of where you fall on the NIMBY-YIMBY spectrum, I am nicknaming tonight PIMBY Night, for preservation in my backyard. Because all of the people and places that we cite tonight are all about preservation. Preservation practice, preservation philosophy, preservation policy, preservation parity, and yes, even some preservation politics. Collectively, they have embraced and spread preservation in their backyards and beyond. And so our 2020 and 2022 PIMBY awardees represent the geographic and cultural diversity of Virginia's preservationists who advocate for traditional and indigenous cultural places, communities, countryside, presidential home sites, places of worship, industry, and commerce. Some are places where people labored because they were enslaved, and where the descendants have later reclaimed not only their freedom, but also their voices, and finally the right to influence how and who will tell their stories. These are places now not only of history, but also of acknowledgement and recognition. What does a history that centers people and place look like? What does Virginia's history tell us about temporality, endurance, disappearance, reemergence, threats and emergencies, resilience, and disasters and opportunities? I think it looks a lot like tonight's PEMB class. We not only award them, but emulate them as preservation models. Historic preservation operates on the fronts of many contemporary issues. While we celebrate success tonight, we realize also that we PEMBs, our preservation partners, and our allies face unprecedented challenges in our field, and it will take all of us and many more to bring our talents, skills, and funds to adapt and upgrade the preservation tools that have kept so many of our beloved places in use, often with restored function and economic vitality. Today, we face pressing, immediate, and encroaching threats to the preservation of Virginia's resources, both well-known resources and those that remain unknown. And that is of particular concern because we have finally come to a community is quickly trying to compensate for what has been ignored, excluded, and misrepresented in the past. And so we're trying to catch up with documentation, registration, and historic markers, while we also confront urban change, rural development, the ravages of time and neglect, new infrastructure systems, just as past generations of preservationists responded and reacted to urban renewal and interstate highways. Intense storms are a major threat. We all know that there are immediate threats to our coastal areas where many of our best-known resources exist. It is less well known, perhaps, that inland areas such as downtown Stanton, Virginia, suffer recurrent and persistent flooding that damages historic buildings, periodically taking them out of active economic uses. And our own Preservation Virginia properties, particularly Cape Henry and Jamestown, highlight the urgency of taking immediate actions. Elizabeth mentioned our timely dune and lighthouse intervention restoration projects at Cape Henry, where we have worked closely with the local community and local government. And just last week, we convened a Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation group with Jamestown and Preservation Virginia staff, meeting on site with archaeologists, historians, architects, engineers, landscape architects, and wetlands and environmental resilience specialists to consider best practices to prioritize archaeological resources that will reveal vital information about the Virginia Indian, European, and African cultures that interacted, confronted, and worked for and with each other in the 17th century, influencing Virginia's, American, and global histories in ways that we are realizing are still so significant to our lives today. Among us tonight is the first woman chief to lead a tribe in Virginia since the 18th century, a chief who has worked to preserve and educate the public in history, culture, and traditions, to secure federal recognition and reacquire tribal land, to establish preservation initiatives, including the recently formed Virginia Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Preservation Fund. Also with us are representatives of the first independent, descendant-led organization to establish itself as equal co-steward of a major historic site in reshaping and sharing in new and meaningful ways the narratives of enslaved Americans at Virginia plantation sites. And also a woman honoring the African American heritage of an industrial school for youth to successfully interweave business community groups and faith groups into a project that built community leadership and stewardship. Nuts and bolts, brick and stone, craftsmanship, and professional expertise in the broad fields of historic preservation, archaeology, and historic architecture remain in our lifeblood, and we still find challenges in approaching 17th and 18th century sites, particularly places of commerce and industry. And we all remain ever ready to understand, perpetuate, and practice traditional trades to keep them alive. At our legislative virtual event last winter, we heard about the economic value of traditional trades. And so tonight we also honor the restoration of a circa 1775 grist mill of Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson, to be an award-worthy project with its use of custom mortars made from historic formulas. Like so many preservation projects, the project also has a social and recreational component to reach out to hikers and cyclists on the adjacent trail to learn some of the history of how Virginia's rivers were an integral part of commerce and industry historically. Now, sometimes preservation professionals work in career silos without opportunities to share their knowledge wide and far. But sometimes some jump the fence in the ivory tower and jump right out. And so tonight we also honor a career-long historical architect who has worked across the Commonwealth at some of our traditionally revered sites, who played major roles on preservation and planning boards and commissions, and now in retirement is applying that knowledge and wisdom of a lifetime to provide pro bono services to African American churches and schools, particularly Virginia's Tuskegee design Rosenwald rural schools, many coming from Preservation Virginia's and the National Trust for Historic Preservation Most Endangered lists. At the same time, we note private sector preservation leadership of individuals who have been the hallmarks of preservation in Virginia, exemplary preservationists who embrace opportunities to motivate and inspire others through generous local, national, and international philanthropic efforts that result in meticulous restorations, profitable historic place rehabilitations, and the donations of historic properties to local societies and foundations that will ensure that historic properties are preserved and reused. Preservation Virginia recognizes the importance of retaining historic property in active use, and a major partner in doing that, along with the Department of Historic Resources, are local governments that establish architectural review boards, historic commissions, support and promote tax act projects, own and operate their own historic properties, and interpret local history. We should acknowledge that much of our state's affordable housing is actually historic, and in most cases listed in or eligible for listing in our state and national registers. Most of this housing is naturally occurring affordability, but many intentional rehab housing projects have used our state and federal tax credits to improve or initiate affordable housing for seniors and others in historic buildings and complexes. And over the last year, infrastructure is a word that we all grew accustomed to hearing. And so now, knowing that infrastructure projects will be very much a part of our lives as preservationists, we must thoughtfully consider how, where, and if utility corridors, massive data centers, new and expanded road construction, and now solar farms can fit into our ever-threatened rural and coastal landscapes. We need to continue to work in productive and proactive coalitions to plan infrastructure projects in ways that are equitable and just and that meet 21st century needs in responsible and innovative ways so that countryside and cultural and scenic values are considered from the beginning. And we need to retool to work more effectively in cities where land values are in danger of becoming so expensive that the existing buildings that occupy them, historic buildings, are now endangered. But as we contemplate the future and the growth that necessarily accompanies it, we also realize that we need to continue to look for ways to revive declining or blighted neighborhoods in some of Virginia's once thriving industrial cities, aiming to enhance property values, local revenues, and restore urban vitality. And so tonight we award an extraordinary multi-phased adaptive reuse project that has regenerated an entire tobacco warehouse block in Danville into housing, modern offices, restaurants, and art space, a vibrant city space. We also celebrate one of the oldest houses in Bristol, Virginia, that has been rehabbed to contribute to local tourism and economic development as a newly revived and hospitable bed and breakfast. I am sure that your lives, like mine, intersect with many of the awardees and the places and projects that they represent. Our combined 2020-2022 class of PIMBYs are inspiring, innovative, and issue-oriented. My heart is filled with gratitude for the work that they do, and I am pleased and proud to welcome and congratulate them for leading the way in preserving Virginia. Many of you know about the generosity of David Rubinstein to historic sites in Virginia. Mr. Rubinstein is recipient of our Trustees' Excellence in Achievement Award for his generous support of preservation projects in the Commonwealth. The following video showcases some of that work and David Rubinstein's investment in Virginia's and our nation's history.
I will never forget when he finally had convinced David Rubinstein to come visit Montpelier, and it was a cold, miserable, rainy day. And he walked into the entrance hall called the South Passage, and this is where all the visitors today to Montpelier and in Madison's time would have walked in, and there was nothing on the walls. It was a brown rug, a few little sad chairs, and David Rubinstein threw his hands up in the air as if to sort of say, what kind of place is this? This does not look like a presidential home. But I think his heart hurt a little bit when he walked into that empty house at Montpelier. And I know in some ways that nudged him to making an investment.
Arlington House has a rich connection to George Washington. And I think Mr. Rubinstein saw that as part of the fabric of the American story and something that really needed rejuvenating. His gift has really impacted the visitor experience a couple ways. This is the largest curatorial project we've ever done at the National Park Service. It's made the facility more accessible to those with mobility impairments, but the exhibits themselves now have touch features, they have audio features.
He cares very deeply about civic education, and our role is to help excite people about the history of their country in all of its glory and challenges.
We hadn't yet had the opportunity to tell a complete story at James Madison's Montpelier. It's definitely about James and Dolly, but there's 300 other people whose stories make Montpelier so important. So the Rubinstein initiative was really about both parts, furnishing the house, but telling the rest of the story.
Visitors today don't know what these buildings look like. They don't have a sense of what they are inside, how you interact with them as spaces. And so by able to see it, you're able to quickly understand a little bit of what life was like for the people who lived at Monticello.
One of the things that we're able to do because of David's great generosity is to acquire rare books and manuscripts. And George Washington rare books and manuscripts are incredibly expensive. And his gift has allowed us to be at the cutting edge, saving materials that could be lost and also making materials available for the general public.
He famously says that it's only in this country that a man like him could have risen to the achievements and success he has. And he is devoted to giving back and to sharing what it is about this country that made that possible. And for us at Monticello, that's our founding ideals. And it's also the true story of our founding. And that includes those who were left out and those who were included.
Something I'm such an admirer of David Rubinstein is that he's always understood about the importance of education. And maybe that's because in honor of his parents, his mother being a teacher, his father being a postal worker, he just understands that not everybody has access to the full breadth of American history.
What Mr. Rubinstein was able to give to Arlington House and the National Park Service was excitement about this place, to tell the whole story of Arlington House and all the people who lived here.
Our founding is really based upon philanthropic efforts and partnerships that continues today, and he sets the model for it. Certainly he's done it in a tremendous way, but I think there are rich opportunities for other people to be involved.
His investment in us at Montpelier has led others to also step up to the plate.
You know, charity is something that is extremely important to these institutions to keep them going. And it's great to have an example to point to encourage people to give their time, their effort, their talent, their money to make this great cause succeed.
And tonight, we
Thank
are
you very
honored
much.
to have David M. Rubinstein join us as a live stream from Colorado. Mr. Rubinstein, on behalf of Preservation Virginia, I am pleased to announce and congratulate you as our esteemed recipient of Preservation Virginia Trustees Excellence in Achievement Award. I present to our preservation audience via live stream, Mr. David Rubinstein.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Clearly, the video you just saw is much more laudatory than probably I deserve, and so please lower your expectations of what I'm able to say. And I really don't deserve this award, but I'm certainly honored to receive it. I apologize for the fact that I have to make a speech this evening in Colorado, and therefore I couldn't be with you. But hopefully, at some other point, I'll be able to meet with some of you in person. I would like to just describe in a few minutes why I have been interested in this subject matter. And my interest is in preserving a number of things relating to history. I like to preserve buildings, documents, books, and maps. And in recent years, I've been also focused on preserving myself. As I age, I recognize I need to take care of myself as well. But the reason I'm interested in preserving buildings and documents and maps and the books is this. Throughout history, it's been the case that one civilization or one generation recognizes that what happened before it provides lessons of what might be useful to live with in the future. In other words, if you learn what was made as a mistake before, you probably can correct that mistake in the future. A famous Harvard historian, George Santayana, said, "Those who do not remember history are condemned to relive it." And so, of course, we want to preserve what happened in the past so we can learn from it and hopefully learn from the mistakes. But the real question people should ask is this. Well, we can preserve what the words are in the Declaration of Independence. We can preserve what the Mount Vernon looked like. We can preserve what the Federalist Papers said, or we can preserve what the first map of the United States, which I bought and am now put on display at the Library of Congress. We can see what all these things are on a computer slide. So why do we actually need to preserve the actual buildings, the actual books, the actual documents? Well, this is the reason, in my view. The human brain has advanced dramatically in the last several 100,000 years as we all Homo sapiens have emerged from caves and built civilization. Fortunately, while we have great technological skills and developments, the human brain has not yet evolved to the point where seeing the Mount Vernon in person is the same as seeing it on a computer slide. Seeing Monticello in person is not the same as seeing it on a computer slide. Reading the Declaration of Independence in the original document is not the same as seeing a computer slide of it. And why is that important? Well, what we have in our country is a history deficit. We obviously have financial deficits, we have other deficits in our country, but we have a true history deficit. The people in our country aren't learning history to the extent that they used to, and they should. And as a result, you learn things like this. The average American cannot pass the citizenship test needed to become a citizen in this country if you're a foreign citizen. In other words, foreign citizens or foreigners who want to become U.S. citizens have to take a basic citizenship test, and 91% of them pass it. The same test was essentially given to Americans born in this country several years ago, and in all 50 states, and only one state could a bare majority actually pass that test. What does that tell you? It tells you that we don't really know much about our history and our civics, in part because we don't teach it very much anymore. So what we want to do is make sure we do things that enable people to learn and value the past. One of the best ways of doing that is preserving buildings, for example. When somebody goes to see Mount Vernon, almost certainly before they go to Mount Vernon, they're going to hear about it or read about it. And without doubt, when they go there, they're going to get a tour and a lot more knowledge about it than they had before. And then when they go home, most likely they're going to read about it. And as a result of those experiences, they're going to know much more about Mount Vernon or George Washington than they would have just if they'd seen Mount Vernon on a computer slide. So while maybe in 1,000 years or so, seeing something on a computer slide will be the same as seeing it in person. But we hopefully won't get to that point, and we certainly aren't there now. And so the value of preserving is because we want to make certain we have civilization improve in the future. We want to make certain that people understand the history, the good and the bad of the past, and we can make judgments about what we should do better in the future. And so I applaud all of you who are taking your time and your energy to help out with the preservation of Virginia. And as I like to remind people, philanthropy is an ancient Greek word. It's derived from an ancient Greek word that means loving humanity. It doesn't mean rich people writing checks. Those who are fortunate enough to be able to write checks, that's great for them to be able to do so, and I congratulate those who do so. But I like to remind people that the most valuable thing you can give to preserve anything or help your country is your time. Time is the only commodity we cannot manufacture, we can't make more of. We all have a finite amount of time on the face of this earth. And so for all of you, I would encourage you to think about what you can do more than you've already done using your time and as well as your energy and your ideas, because everyone can't afford to do the things that that provide money to some of these institutions. And while money is important to enable them to fix and preserve the buildings or other kinds of things like documents, it's not possible for everybody to do those kind of things. So what I think everybody should do is think about what they can do to use their time, energy, and ideas to help preserve Virginia's buildings, because by doing so, people that visit them will learn more about Virginia's history, the good and the bad, and learn more about how we can all be better Americans and better citizens. And so I applaud all of you for what you've done. And I want to thank you for what I would call your patriotic philanthropy, because all of you are patriotic philanthropists by doing what you're doing to help preserve the buildings, the historic buildings of Virginia. My part has been very, very modest. I don't live in Virginia. I didn't grow up in Virginia, and I also didn't go to school in Virginia. However, I think that what's happened in Virginia is an important part of our historic country. And some of the most important events and some of the most important buildings and houses in our country happen to be in Virginia. So it's just fortuitous that all of you who live in Virginia, and I assume most of you do, happen to live in a country, in a state which has enormous value to the country. And so we're helping the country by preserving these historic buildings, because other people from around the country and around the world will be able to see, as a result of your efforts, these kind of buildings preserved, and they can learn more about these buildings and more about our history and more about ways we can make certain in the future we do better than we've done in the past in certain areas. So thank you all very much for honoring me this way. I'm sorry I couldn't be there this evening, but I just hope all of you realize that what you're doing is a very great act of philanthropy, is a great act of giving back to your country, not only to your state. And I hope all the citizens of the whole country recognize that when they come to Virginia, they're going to see historic buildings that are really important to our country's history, and they've been preserved in large part by the efforts of people like you and your organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rubinstein. We greatly appreciate you taking the time this evening, and we do look forward to presenting you with the award in person sometime very soon, and hope you'll be able to stay tuned as we make the awards to our other recipients. We have a short film that will introduce our 2020 class of Preservation Awards.
Isabel Thornton and Restoration Housing, Roanoke. Restoration Housing, headed by Executive Director Isabel Thornton, is a Roanoke-based organization that rehabilitates historic structures for reuse as affordable rental properties, benefiting limited-income individuals and families. Restoration Housing restored Villa Heights, a circa 1820 house, after a decade of vacancy, and restored it as its first community impact project. Selma Mansion, a colonial revival mansion important to Loudoun County's history, located in the Catoctin Rural Historic District, was added to Preservation Virginia's Most Endangered Historic Places list in 2009. The current owners, Sharon D. Verts and Scott F. Miller, acquired and completed a major renovation project which saved the mansion from demolition. Chloe Shelton was chosen for this year's Young Preservationist of the Year award for her efforts to bring local history to life by writing and directing 2 films, Till I Come Home and Cotton Clouds, based on Roanoke's rich history, as well as for her efforts involving other young people interested in film and history. E.J. Scott is being recognized for her research and advocacy protecting the historic post-emancipation community of Carver Road in Prince William County, saving the Liberty Street African American houses in Manassas, and for her service on the Virginia Women's Monument Commission. Mark Reed and the Virginia Beach Historic Preservation Commission are being recognized for their innovative preservation program, which includes a historic marker project, a grants program that has helped to tell previously overlooked stories in Virginia Beach, and an elementary school education project. The Virginia Beach Commission was also instrumental in supporting and raising funds for the recent dune restoration project at Cape Henry Lighthouse. Literacy Interactives is receiving their award for their work researching and restoring the Parker Sidner Cabin. Through this project, Literacy Interactives has helped raise awareness on the lives of the enslaved and free people of color in the Mecklenburg County region. The Halifax County Historical Society is being recognized for their research and publication of an architectural history of Halifax County, Virginia, a dedicated and comprehensive undertaking that produced an outstanding record of Halifax County's historic places, intended to inspire a renewal of stewardship of the county's irreplaceable historic sites.
And now we'd like to, one by one, bring the award winners to accept their awards to the stage. We'll bring everybody, come up one by one, but we will hold you all here so we can take a group picture. So for Outstanding Preservation Projects, the Gabriella Page Preservation Award, we have Restoration Housing for the Villa Heights in Roanoke. Selma Mansion in Leesburg. For Outstanding Community Preservation, the Catherine Glaze Rockwood Award, Virginia Beach Historic Preservation Commission. Yeah. And I know because she's sitting right up front, I'm going to let you all get up here because our Young Preservationist of the Year, Chloe Shelton. For Outstanding Historic Preservation Efforts, the George W.G. Stoner and Melville Jack Jennings Research and Education Award, Literacy Interactives, the Parker Sidner Cabin. Oh, she's over there. You all may have to. And for the Outstanding Preservation Achievement, the Lewis J. Malin Award, E.J. Scott. I didn't, oh, I'm sorry. I need better glasses. Another outstanding historic preservation research effort is the Halifax County Historical Society for the book they publish on historic sites in Halifax.
If you want to close, I'll do a group picture before we take our seats, and you'll come on over.
We need to get him up front. Thank you all. And we will cue up the film for the 2022 class.
.500 block of Craighead Street, Danville. Rick Barker Properties, Architectural Partners, and Thrive Contracting undertook an extraordinary multi-phase project to bring back an entire commercial block of Danville's Tobacco Warehouse District. Including the former Piedmont Hardware Building, the Hughes and Venable buildings, and the Nabisco and Swift buildings, the block was transformed into modern offices, restaurants, art spaces, and apartments. It offers a prime example of success in transforming blocks of once vacated buildings into vibrant city spaces. I.C. Fowler House, Bristol. The team of Tom and Victoria Mitterraj, Paul Harden Cap, and Dillard Construction undertook a meticulous study of the I.C. Fowler House and performed extensive renovations. Built in 1868 by George Blackley, a Bristol carpenter and furniture maker, the Greek Revival building is one of the oldest extant houses in Bristol. The project included rebuilding and repointing foundation and basement walls, restoring the portico, windows, doors, clapboard walls, pine floors, mantels, trim, and the Greek Revival door surrounds. Shadwell Gristmill Project, Albemarle County. Dominion Traditional Building Group's expertise in stonemasonry in the field of traditional trades stands out in the Shadwell Gristmill restoration. Built circa 1757 by Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson, the walls and foundation are being meticulously restored by the Dominion Traditional Building Group using custom-made mortar based on formulas from the 19th century. Accessible only by the Old Mills Trail, the masons of Dominion Traditional had to hike in, crossing a field, train tracks, and steep embankment to arrive at the site to work. St. Andrew's Catholic Church, Roanoke. The multi-phased renovation of St. Andrew's Catholic Church, an iconic landmark overlooking downtown Roanoke, is the remarkable result of a team of architects, contractors, consultants, and the owner. These included Reverend Kevin Segerblom, Wayne Gould, Master Engineers in Design, Cornett and Cundiff Incorporated, Dominion Traditional Building Group, Evergreen Architectural Arts, and Hill Studio. The church was built in 1902 to serve the first Roman Catholic Church congregation in Roanoke, and is an incredible example of ecclesiastical Gothic Revival architecture. As a practicing architect, Joseph Di Alejandro brought his skill and expertise to structures across the Commonwealth, including Preservation Virginia's John Marshall House, Cole Diggs House, and the first rehabilitation and expansion of the historic Jamestown Research Center. Most notably, he served as preservation architect at the University of Virginia. After retirement, Mr. Alejandro donated a great deal of his time to consult and assist at sites including the First Baptist Church, Charlottesville, St. John Rosenwald School, Albemarle County, Pine Grove Rosenwald School, Cumberland County, among many more. The Montpelier Descendants Committee is the first independent, descendant-led organization to establish itself as an equal co-steward of a major historic site in America. Through its work on a series of public programs, events, and research, the Montpelier Descendants Committee helped restore the narratives of enslaved Americans at James Madison's Montpelier and other Virginia plantation sites. Drawing on extensive experience in community outreach in Manassas and Prince William County, Keisha Wilson Sagunro organized preservation efforts at the Jenny Dean Memorial and Manassas Industrial School for Colored Youth in Manassas. Ms. Wilson Sagunro successfully wove together business, community groups, and interfaith organizations into a project that channeled local youth and adults and emphasized community leadership, stewardship, and preservation. Baroness of Lochiel of Scotland, Canon of the Episcopal Church, Dr. Betsy Parker's leadership and preservation efforts include the meticulous restoration of the historic Huntland Estate and Farmer's Delight Estate in Loudoun County, developing and funding the National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Upperville Colt and Horse Showgrounds, and the donation of the Old General Store to the Unison Preservation Society and the historic Allen House in Middleburg to the Middleburg Museum Foundation. Embracing opportunities to motivate and inspire, her many other generous local, national, and international philanthropic efforts have resulted in the preservation and reuse of many historic places. As the first woman chief to lead a tribe in Virginia since the 18th century, Chief G. Ann Richardson has worked tirelessly to preserve and educate the public on the history, culture, and traditions of the Rappahannock Indian tribe and tribal nations in Virginia. Chief Richardson is committed to ensuring that the Rappahannock tribal youth and the public know and understand their history and traditions. Under her leadership, the tribe received federal recognition and recently reacquired tribal land. She has worked with state officials to support preservation initiatives, including the recently formed Virginia Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Preservation Fund.
So we'd like to bring the 2022 award winners to the front. For the Outstanding Preservation Project, the Gabriella Page Preservation Award. We have the 500 block of Craighead Street, Danville. The Shadwell Gristmill Project in Charlottesville.
The Dominion fellas, Dominion
Yeah, they're coming. I see Fowler House in Bristol. You all may have gotten also the award for coming the farthest. St. Andrew's Catholic Church in Roanoke.
I think Dominion Traditional's on like all of the awards.
For Outstanding Community Preservation, the Catherine Glaze Rockwood Award, Joseph Di Lehendro. Montpelier Descendants Community. I'm not sure we have. And Keisha Wilson Segunro. Outstanding Preservation Achievement, the Lewis J. Malin Award, Chief Ann Richardson. And Dr. Betsy Parker. So we're going to try that picture again. I don't think we got more people this time. We have one more presentation today. This isn't an award, but it's a heartfelt so long. Good luck, and we can't wait to see what you do. One of the members of our team is leaving us on October 1st, and we'd like to honor her with a resolution that was passed by the Board of Trustees in secret because she was at the board meeting today, so we had to do it without her name. Jen, would you come forward? You want to read it? Oh, you have-
Whereas Jennifer Hurst Wender joined Preservation Virginia staff in 2008 as the education coordinator, and her leadership abilities quickly became evident and led to her appointment as Director of Museum Operations and Education in 2016, with a charge to manage and grow the programming and preservation efforts at 5 of Preservation Virginia's historic sites. And whereas she worked diligently to expand and ensure a more inclusive and diverse narrative through programs and projects as varied as the Salon series at the John Marshall House, visits by Joseph McGill, undertaking research related to the genealogy of the enslaved communities at Bacon's Castle in Scotchtown, restoration of the enslaved quarters at Bacon's Castle, the dune restoration at Cape Henry, and numerous other efforts. And whereas she formed meaningful partnerships with the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience and participated in leadership programs at Richmond Hill, Virginia Association of Museums, the Slave Dwelling Project Conference, American Alliance of Museums, and many other venues to share Preservation Virginia's experiences in expanding our community engagement and to sharpen her own skills. And whereas she oversaw the expansion of the Preservation Services team to include curatorial education and restoration management that fulfill the organization's stewardship responsibilities, expanded its programs, and offered opportunities for earned and philanthropic support. And whereas her efforts have resulted in new programs, exhibits, restoration projects, and educational offerings, including most recently, They Left Their Mark at Bacon's Castle, a webinar about Cape Henry Lighthouse first African-American keeper, Willis Augustus Hodges, encouraging engagement in a NAGPRA process, and growing the fee-for-service program with our restoration team. And the last whereas. Whereas she and the management team navigated the complexities of the recent COVID-19 pandemic challenges to ensure the financial stability of the organization while never faltering in her commitment to expand the narrative and share the stories. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of Preservation Virginia recognizes Jennifer Hurst Wender for her leadership and commitment to our sites as she leaves to take the position of Executive Director at the Germanna Foundation. And be it further resolved that the Secretary transmits a copy of this resolution of appreciation to Jennifer Hurst Wender, and that a copy be spread upon the minutes of the organization. Thank you, Jen. We look forward to your next amazing accomplishment. This concludes our evening's program. Thank you to all of you for attending. It's so good to be back together again. We look forward to seeing you at our next events. Safe travels back home, and we'll see you soon. Good night.